everyone, this is Devleena welcoming you all to another exciting episode of Iconic Ads with Devleena and Saurabh. And with me, I have my expert co host, Mr. Saurabh Bajaj. A warm welcome to you,
Hi,
Saurabh. Hi,
hi, great
once
to be here
again.
again.
And I'm very excited to bring our guest for today, a seasoned marketing professional with she has worked with substantial companies like Mondelez International, the Coca-Cola Company, and a warm welcome to you, Miss Suparna Madan. Hi, Suparna.
Hello. Hi, how are
Hi,
you?
Suparna.
I'm all good, Suparna, and I'm excited to talk about the a very interesting brand and a very interesting campaign. Before we start the campaign, let me play the ad, and then we will jump into the conversation.
Peckle, peckle, ping, ping. Peckle, peckle, ping, ping. Peckle, peckle, ping, ping. Heckle, peckle, ping, ping. Heckle, peckle, ping, ping. Heckle, peckle, ping. Peckle, peckle, ping, ping. Heckle, peckle, ping, ping.
You want?
बाय अंकल जेम्स को कभी ना नहीं कहना और भी कलरफुल नया कैडबरी जेम्स रहो उम्रलेस
Sure. So this is again when I joined Cadbury Mondelez in 2012. Saurabh Bajaj was the category manager for Gems, and I was on the inside side. So we used to have a lot of these discussions on अच्छा ठीक है क्या करना है कैसे करना है, and so that is when there was also a strict marketing to kids policy that was coming in place. I think in 2010 is when we signed the first version, and then it just kept getting stricter after that. So if you go back, I think 50 years ago, which is roughly how old Gems is, the reason it was born was that it was a kids brand. It was something that was, created to bring delight to a kid's life. It was very, very clearly, about colors, about abundance. You would have seen a lot of kids, or when you were a kid, maybe if you had Gems, sorting, by colors, playing with them. It's not something that you just put in your mouth and eat. You look at it, you play with it. There's a lot more interaction that happens with the brand, and that is how it is constructed, and that is what kids want. So the truth is that, even 30 years ago, the category itself, the entire chocolate category used to be about kids. And gradually we transitioned out of that. So there was the Dairy Milk iconic ad, the cricket ad in which you have Shimona, running on the field and all, and which is when the upaging started. But Gems, even till 2010, 2012, it was a very, very kids brand, and most of the communication used to be about that. And then we signed the policy and entered Saurabh Bajaj, and he was entrusted with making adults like Gems. So that is, or it's less about adults, but at least older kids. So definitely not under, first it was 6 years, then it became 12 years, because the thought was that in the end, this is a sugar-based product, and it is not about only the kids asking for it. We need to make sure that the parents have a view on it, and we can't be marketing directly to children. So as a result, a lot of changes happened. If you look at the ads for Gems, like maybe 20 years ago, you'll see that the protagonist is a kid. You will see young children. You will see 6 years old, 6 year old, 7 year olds. There's a mad scientist ad, or a telescope kind of. They're looking at stars in the galaxy, something like that. So the kids are the protagonists. They're having fun in a very kiddie way. There's a classroom which is shown, and we moved away from that. So while we had to move away from what the um, format was, or what, kids are, we had to move away from a kiddie world, right? So we couldn't look at play areas or schools or classrooms or things that, kids would do in their, in their playtime. The kind of humor that we had to use, or the kind of emotional benefit that was coming through, that is not something that we could have changed drastically. And we tried when I took over Gems, and we bombed very badly, and then we realized that, okay, fine, this doesn't work. uh, when you're transitioning a consumer, across, especially when you're transitioning a consumer across ages, it can't happen in 1 or 2 years. And this transformation needs to happen immediately, which is what it does. Like in your media, in policies, in what ingredients you put into the brand, what pack sizes, portion sizes you give, those things do happen. But consumers don't transition that fast. They take their time. And I think a classic example is M&M. So if you have the M&Ms, they've been around for, if I'm not mistaken, almost 100 years. And they also started as kiddie brands. So you have those, nice kiddie caricatures of M&Ms. And gradually over time, they have transitioned their consumers to older and older and older consumers. And until now, a large cohort is actually adult females. And they have those share bags which are permanently inside their, purses, which they take out, and they can have a couple of pellets when they're in the mood, or when they can give it to their kid when the kid comes. So this transition has taken time even for M&M. And while a large cohort of their consumers is still kids, they have managed to transition it so that there is a significant consumption which is happening from age groups which are older than say 10 or 12 years. But in the case of gems, this the same thing would have applied. Like, it would have taken time. And the moment somebody became, say, for example, 6 years old or 7 years old, they would drop off from gems very sharply, move to other brands, Five Star or Dairy Milk, or whatever is a much more slightly more grown up brand, because they would start finding gems too kiddie. Like, oh, this is for my younger brother, this is like too kiddie for me. So that was something that we had to correct. That this is not something which is only for your it's not even for a 6-year old, it's for the younger brother of the 6-year old. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we had to keep moving up the ages gradually, so that the consumption could be spread across slightly older age groups. Similarly, when you look at gems, it's not about what is the age of the child, it's about the child inside you. And we all have a child inside us. It comes out even for Mr. Bajaj. I'm sure it keeps leaping out once in a while. So that is the child that we have to appeal to. And that is the work that we did over this journey, because the transition would have taken time. But in the end, we are all a sum of all our experiences and all the adults and all the children and everybody who's inside us. And we have to appeal to that child and make him choose gems. So that is the kind of work that we have done over here.
So just to segue a little bit into the back, I actually first started handling gems in 2008. So I had just come into brands. I was the brand manager and activation for Dairy Milk, while I was the brand manager for Gems. And this was just after the telescope ad which Suparna was mentioning was the last ad that was played, right? And personally, I didn't like it at all, because I just felt it was too kiddie. And the telescope ad, yeah, where basically there are these bunch of kids in a place. There's a scientist. They're going through a telescope, they're seeing it, and there's a gem there which looks like a star, but it's actually a gem on it. Yeah. And I had my boss Bhaskar Chaudhary at that time, right? And I would constantly sort of ungly him, saying I think we are underselling this brand. This brand is, say, the 7th largest brand or something in the category, and we are underselling it because you see it as a 100 crore brand. But M&M is a $4 billion brand, which is 4 times the size of all of Cadbury's offering globally. So we are underseeing its potential. It should be much, much bigger. And we are underselling it just because we have a portfolio task of getting consumption in children. Just because of the portfolio task, we are missing out on big, big opportunity. Yeah. So that's the time when I did a lot of research on Skittles, M&Ms, and said that this is how it can be upaged. And very passionate about this thing, which eventually became the Rangeen Panda. The whole Gems ball came up, etc. But I was in the Gems brand at that time for only 8 months. And then I went on to Celebrations. I did that for a couple of years. And then I came back as a category head for gifting and kids. And that's the time when I worked with Anil, who's the current CMO. Anil and I sort of got together and we got this whole piece of Raho Umarless, where I think this belief that gems should be much bigger, and we are sort of downplaying it, and and of course work very closely with Suparna, who is then the insights person, and this data point is what we used to keep throwing at everybody in the room, saying that what even a 6-year-old says is for their younger brother. So what are we talking about? This is a brand which nobody in the world says is a brand for me. because of the way we treat it. And this is a very crucial insight because, if you see a lot of brands out there who want to get business in kids, when they show themselves as kiddie, children say that, it's meant for somebody who's a baby, right? And for children, a 13 to 14 year is very aspirational. So unless you show yourself as universal, you don't really take off, whether it is, say, the perfetti ads, where you have these teen protagonists, or you have anything else which is also largely consumed in children, but it is really meant for everybody. Yeah. So this is when this whole proposition of Raho Umarless came in, and which is where the whole, from Rangeen Panda, we went over to the museum ad, and then we went over to the garden ad. Yeah, and of course, as Suparna was mentioning, there's a lot of chaos that happened on the scene during the garden ad because the lead actress fell unwell, was inside a hospital room in the midst of the shoot, and then she came back. So there was a fair amount of chaos. But I think behind every great ad, there will be some crazy story for sure. Yeah. And then, this further challenge of this marketing to kids policy came in. Yeah. Now, while we had naturally, even without this policy, decided to make it a lot more universal, and we had said at that time that we are not necessarily changing the consumption target group, but we will change the communication target group. So we'll communicate a little higher, but the consumption might still happen among kids, right? But then with this marketing to kids policy, which I always personally find very contra-intuitive because, marketing to kids policies make great sense in the US, where the, average US citizen has 15 kilos of chocolate in a year. The average Indian has maybe 150 grams or maybe 350 grams of chocolate a year, right? And we have maybe about 5 kilos of gulab jamun. So if there is a marketing kids policy, it should surely be on gulab jamun and not on chocolates. But it's not on gulab jamun; it's on chocolates. So hence it was a bit of a mental tussle for us, saying that it's not sounding very logical, but we should do it. Maybe it is right to start now, and maybe 100 years later it'll make sense, or maybe 10 years later, yeah, and all of that. And hence I think there were these lot of challenges as to, okay, are we following this policy not just in letter but also in spirit? It is one thing to say to people that we're doing it, but if you have to follow a policy, you have to do it in spirit. And then in spirit, are we really following this policy, and are we genuinely now looking at a broader consumption base versus just doing lip service? So I think that's the sort of a challenge and the tussle that we went through it.
Yeah. And like sometimes you can decide that this is the right thing to do, and obviously it needs to be done. But I think it just takes a little time for that transition to happen. So from a consumer's point of view, well, we can say, okay, fine, we figured out that this is something that we are going to do. We do it. The rest of the population, the consumers, they will take their time, and then finally they'll come around. So
yeah. It's also what is very difficult is to change a brand score. If a brand is rooted in a particular core, see, we can do these little shifts. These little shifts can get you a little bit more of one target group, can get you something more from the other. But if you want to do a significant shift, I think you have to, as Suparna said, wait for when the consumer is ready, wait for, have you done it sustainably? Are you providing some ammunition maybe in the product core itself, which is a little different? So I think all of these things are really challenging. So, but anything on the innovation journey of gems that you want to talk about? Like, for example, where did this idea of these large gems come and all of that?
when you look at slightly older audience, they start becoming a little more discerning on what they want in products. So you have 5 Star, which is a involving eat. It is caramelly. You have Cadbury Dairy Milk, which has a specific technology which gives it those flavor notes. And similarly, you start looking much more at treat and indulgence cues. It doesn't matter if the chocolate is just brown in color. It's not only about the visual cues. So fine, the first taste is with the eyes, but it is much more, the shift is much more towards what you're experiencing of the product when you taste it versus what you're seeing. So this is the first thing, and we realize that, when you look at gems, it is a less than 1 gram product, if I'm not mistaken, like one pellet is less than 1 gram. And you have a sugar shell on top of it, and the hit of chocolate, which is what gives you the experience of indulgence, is something that is not going to cut it. And then what you need to give to these consumers while still being in the territory of gems is something that is more indulgent. So we started off with looking at, okay, fine, what is the most indulgent that we can give? What is should we change the chocolate inside? Should we make it dark chocolate? Should we, put in a silk chocolate inside? And then we realize that it's not just about, what is the kind of chocolate which is inside. Fine, we can make it dark chocolate or silk chocolate or put an Oreo crush or whatever you want. It is also about the quantity that you give. The kid is not that tiny anymore, he's older. He needs a bigger hit of chocolate in his mouth. And from this and from a lot of sensorial work, we figured out that fine, possibly monster gems is something that we can go into. Basically how we arrived at the first innovation that we worked on, which is monster gems.
Cool. So, and how did Monster Gems do finally in the market?
So it has been delisted, Saurabh, and
Ouch.
so initially it did very well, but I think what happens is that when you have a small brand, like a brand needs to be a certain size in order to be able to sustain its own budgets. And gems at that point in time wasn't that large. So roughly, if you say you want to put in, say, 20 crores in media or 30 crores in media, or you want to be maybe at least 30 weeks on air or 36 weeks on air, and that's the kind of money that you need, your main brand needs to be able to support it. And gems on its own could not have supported it. Now, if there had been something like, if there's a global fund or something which is initially allowing you to support the brand, fine, it can work. But we ran out of money, and we had a choice in which we could either support monster gems or we could support core gems. And the decision that we made was, fine, we're going to support core gems. The product itself did very well. Consumers liked it very much. We had a lot of these nuances in it, upaged colors. If you look at gems per se, you don't have a brown color, you don't have a deep red color. So which is what the older visual cues are like. So we had tried to do all of that in monster gems, but we weren't able to support it from a budget point of view. So the product was wonderful, but yes, I think these things take time and they need to be supported consistently. So it has been delisted.
So I think we have covered all. So it was an awesome conversation, and I just loved that idea that both of you have somewhere worked behind this particular ad campaign and category. So now I'm more interested to know about the key learnings and takeaways for this from this particular conversation.
Great. No, so I think Gems as a brand is really close to my heart, given the fact that I worked on it, and having seen its evolution over many years, I love what all has happened on that brand. Yeah. So for me, the key three learnings, from this episode, the first one is the fact that as we move towards a larger consumption pool, driven by international mandates or local concerns, it's always about figuring out how do you retain your brand core, right? So how they moved from a brand meant for children to the child within you, and hence Raho more or less. So I think that for me was really beautiful, a great strategic pivot which happens without letting go of your brand core. The second part of the conversation for me, which is exciting, was the role of innovation and the fact that innovation can really drive your brand purpose and your brand strategy, which is where the large gems came in. But every brand manager and brand person needs to often make answer the question: do I have enough resources to invest behind both my innovation and my core? And often core is where it is chosen. So hence we have to be very careful about innovation and ensure, do we have the war chest to support the innovation beyond it? The third part of the conversation for me was the fact that, where as we evolve brands and we get very excited about a strategy which is working. So obviously the museum and the woman on the grass ads were blockbusters. That strategy was surely working. We got mind metrics. We got evolution of the brand towards the new consumption and communication audience of older people. But the gems where it was raining was probably a bit far away from its brand core. And your consumer, you have to grow along with your consumer. You cannot suddenly make a very drastic shift, and that's often the pitfalls of a strategy which has got everybody excited, right? So that for me was a watch out, and hence the summary of the entire conversation was one, hold on to your brand core when you look at a pivot and look for a new consumption audience. Innovation is a great way to grow brand, but then you have to figure out, do you have the investment to hold on to it? Thirdly, brands and brand people need to understand how fast can they move on the strategy, and often a well-made strategy just needs a more degree of time to implement it, and often a lot of changes too fast can often be very difficult. So those for me were the top three learnings.
Super wonderful insights, Saurav. And thank you for sharing such lovely insights with us week on week. Thank you so much.
Great. Looking forward to next week.
Same here.